Charlotte Kensington stood in front of the gilded mirror, staring at the woman she no longer recognized. Layers of delicate lace trailed around her in a river of opulence, the gown's beaded bodice pressing into her ribs as though it was physically trapping her. Maybe it was. A princess-cut diamond gleamed on her finger, heavy with a promise she had no intention of keeping. Her blonde hair was styled into a flawless updo, her makeup perfected to porcelain-like precision, and yet, beneath the carefully curated beauty, her heart hammered against her ribs in panic. This wasn't what she wanted. The Grand Kensington estate buzzed with activity outside her bedroom, filled with Manhattan's elite, waiting to witness the arranged marriage of the season. Her father, Richard Kensington, had spared no expense. It wasn't about love. It never was. It was about business. About power. About sealing the deal with the most dangerous man in New York. Logan Sinclair. A ruthless, cold-hearted billionaire with a reputation sharper than the custom-tailored suits he wore. His name alone sent shivers down Wall Street. He bought out competitors, played kingmaker in the boardroom, and discarded lovers like seasonal accessories. And in less than an hour, she was supposed to be his wife. Charlotte's fingers curled into fists. No. She refused to be a pawn in a game played by men in expensive suits. She refused to become another caged Kensington woman, trapped in a loveless marriage, to satisfy her father's ambitions. She had never met Logan in person, only glimpsed him from afar. He was always the brooding, intimidating figure, standing at the top of the corporate food chain, untouchable. His reputation was built on power plays and billion-dollar deals, and though women threw themselves at him, his rumored playboy ways never resulted in anything serious. Her father believed she would tame him. Charlotte wasn't stupid. Men like Logan Sinclair weren't meant to be tamed. Her pulse spiked as she turned toward her best friend, Isla Whitmore, the only person she trusted in this suffocating world of privilege. Isla's auburn brows furrowed as she adjusted the long train of Charlotte's dress, her voice laced with urgency. "Tell me you have a plan." Charlotte exhaled shakily. "I'm running." Isla's green eyes widened. "Charlotte, I can't do this, Isla. I won't." Her voice wavered, but her resolve didn't. "If I go through with this, I'll spend the rest of my life locked in a contract with a man I don't know." Isla hesitated, glancing toward the door as muffled voices echoed from the hall. "You know your father will come after you, right? And Logan? He's not the type to let a runaway bride go unnoticed." Charlotte swallowed hard. That was the part that terrified her most. The Sinclairs weren't just billionaires. They were ruthless. Logan Sinclair wasn't a man who lost, and he had already lost his bride once. His first engagement, years ago, had ended abruptly when his fiancée left him for a wealthier businessman. The tabloids had devoured the scandal, painting Logan as a cold-hearted, jilted billionaire. He had never been engaged again. Until her. Which meant he wouldn't let her slip through his fingers so easily. But Charlotte would rather run for the rest of her life than marry a man she had no control over. "I'll figure it out," she whispered. "Just help me get out of here." Isla's lips pressed together before she exhaled sharply. "Fine. Let's do this." 30 minutes later, Charlotte had never felt so alive. She sprinted through the back gardens of the Kensington estate, barefoot, her designer heels abandoned in the upstairs bathroom. The late evening air bit into her skin, the chilly breeze making her long, lace sleeves feel suffocating. Her heart pounded with each step, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she darted past the hedges, the distant sounds of laughter and champagne glasses fading behind her. A black sedan waited at the back gate. Isla's driver, Graham, had been bribed handsomely to keep his mouth shut. As soon as she flung the door open and slid inside, Graham peeled away from the estate, tires screeching. Charlotte exhaled a shaking breath. "I can't believe I just did that." Isla grinned from the front seat, her voice smug. "You absolutely did. And the look on your father's face when he realizes? Priceless." But Charlotte wasn't worried about her father. Not really. It was the man she had left behind at the altar. Logan Sinclair. A shiver ran down her spine. What would he do when he found out she was gone? Whatever it was, she doubted it would be forgiving. 6 months later, the waves crashed against the shore as Charlotte wiped the sweat from her forehead, carefully stacking dishes in the tiny cafe she had been working at for the last 4 months. The sleepy coastal town of Rockport had become her sanctuary, far from the looming skyscrapers of New York, far from her father's control. She had changed her name. Cut her hair. She was no longer Charlotte Kensington, Manhattan's reluctant princess. Now, she was Charlie Kent, a nobody, just the way she liked it. For the first time in her life, she was free. Until she heard his voice. Low. Dark. Unmistakable. Hello, Charlotte. Her blood turned to ice. She turned slowly, her heart slamming against her ribs. Logan Sinclair stood just inside the cafe, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his black suit making him look out of place among the cozy warmth of the small-town cafe. But nothing about Logan was warm. His eyes, intense, unreadable, locked onto her. And in that moment, she knew. She was caught. Charlotte felt her breath hitch, her pulse hammering against her ribs. For 6 months, she had lived a quiet life, melting into the background, becoming no one. No gala invitations, no suffocating expectations, no billionaire waiting at the altar to claim her as a business transaction. And yet, in one single moment, he had found her. Logan Sinclair didn't move, but his presence was devouring. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice or caused a scene, he didn't have to. Power clung to him like a second skin. It was in the sharp cut of his black suit, the calm confidence in his posture, the way he studied her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. Charlotte swallowed, her throat dry. This was bad. Hello, Charlotte. His voice was deep, rich, polished steel wrapped in silk. She was rooted to the spot, unable to move. It wasn't just fear, it was something else, something dangerous. He looked different. Or maybe she was seeing him clearly for the first time. His black hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hands through it one too many times. His jaw was clenched, the faintest shadow of stubble darkening his skin, and his eyes, those piercing storm-gray eyes, had lost their corporate detachment. This wasn't the billionaire who made cold business decisions. This was a man who had hunted her down. Logan, she managed, forcing steel into her voice. Long way from New York, don't you think? One of his brows lifted in a slow, deliberate arch. I could say the same about you. Her heart thundered, but she lifted her chin, willing herself to look unaffected. You shouldn't be here. A humorless smirk tugged at his lips. You shouldn't have run. Charlotte exhaled sharply. You and I both know this marriage was a deal between our fathers. You'll be fine without it. Hell, you should be thanking me. This way, you don't have to be shackled to some woman you don't even know. Something flickered in his gaze. Is that what you think? Her stomach twisted. What else was she supposed to think? Before she could form a response, Logan stepped closer, and she instinctively backed up. But there was nowhere to go. The counter was behind her, trapping her in a small, dangerous space with him. The air crackled between them, thick with something unspoken. I don't need to be married to secure a business deal, Charlotte, he said, his voice low. And I sure as hell wouldn't have come all this way just to drag back an unwilling bride if that was all you were. Her breath caught. Then why are you here? He studied her, his expression unreadable. Because I don't like losing. A chill ran through her, but before she could respond, a voice interrupted them. Charlie, everything okay? Charlotte turned sharply. Ben, the cafe owner, stood near the back door, his expression laced with concern. She should say no. She should tell Ben that this man, this billionaire, wasn't here for coffee, he was here to ruin her life. But the truth was, Logan wasn't here to hurt her. That was the most terrifying part of all. She forced a smile. Yeah, Ben, Everything's fine. Logan didn't react, but she could feel the weight of his stare as Ben hesitated before nodding and heading into the back. The moment they were alone again, Logan's voice dropped, dark and smooth. Get your things, Charlotte. Her nails dug into her palms. Excuse me? We're leaving. She let out a sharp laugh. Oh, you think I'm just going to follow you like some obedient little wife? Logan's jaw flexed. No. I expect you to come with me, because we both know this was never a clean escape. His gaze flickered toward the counter, the dishes she had been wiping down before he walked in. This life you built? It's temporary. You don't belong here. Something hot and furious surged in her chest. I belong wherever I choose. He exhaled through his nose, slow and measured, as if biting back something sharper. Is this what you want? He asked. A quiet life where no one asks anything of you? Yes, she snapped. Liar. The word cut through her defenses like a blade. Her breath hitched, because God help her, he wasn't entirely wrong. She had wanted freedom. She had wanted to live. But had she ever really been living here? Logan stepped even closer, his voice a slow, deliberate murmur. You want control, Charlotte. You want something that's yours. You think I don't understand that? His gray eyes darkened. You think I don't know what it's like to have everyone expect you to play a role you never agreed to? Her pulse skipped. She had always thought of Logan as cold, untouchable. But there was something in his voice, something wounded, something almost familiar. Her throat tightened. You don't know anything about me. His lips pressed together. Don't I? She hated that she had no response. Because suddenly, Logan Sinclair wasn't just the ruthless billionaire she had run from. He was a man who understood her more than she wanted him to. The realization sent a tremor down her spine. Logan exhaled, his voice softer now. Get your things, Charlotte. The commanding edge was still there, but it wasn't cold. It was something else. Something dangerous. Something she wasn't sure she could resist. She turned away from him, her hands trembling as she grabbed her small bag from behind the counter. When she looked back, Logan was watching her, his expression unreadable. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she had been caught, or saved. Charlotte hadn't spoken a word to Logan since she stepped into his private jet. She sat stiffly in one of the plush leather seats, arms crossed, glaring out the window as the Las Vegas skyline loomed in the distance. The tension between them was thick, heavy, charged, filling the cabin with an almost suffocating weight. Logan, however, was completely at ease. He sat across from her, long legs stretched out, fingers idly scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't just abducted his runaway bride. Charlotte clenched her jaw, refusing to break the silence first. It wasn't until the plane began its descent that Logan finally spoke, his deep voice smooth and controlled. We land in 10 minutes. She shot him a glare. Oh, good. Can't wait to be forced into holy matrimony in the wedding capital of the world. His lips quirked into something that wasn't quite a smirk. You ran from a Kensington Sinclair wedding with 500 guests and an 8-tier cake. I figured a 24-hour chapel was a simpler alternative. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? He leaned back in his seat, studying her with those unreadable gray eyes. I think you're fighting a war that doesn't need to be fought. Charlotte's hands curled into fists. You kidnapped me. Logan's expression remained infuriatingly calm. You came willingly. She let out a sharp, frustrated exhale. He had a point, damn him. But that didn't mean she wasn't still furious. She turned back to the window, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. But as the plane descended, her stomach twisted with an unfamiliar feeling. Not fear. Not even anger. Something closer to uncertainty. Because Logan wasn't acting like the cold-hearted billionaire she had imagined him to be. She had expected him to be furious when he found her. She had expected punishment, maybe even cruelty. Instead, he had been controlled, calculated, and worse, he had been right. Charlotte had spent 6 months pretending she had built a life for herself. But deep down, she had always known that she was just waiting. For what, she wasn't sure. But she never expected the thing she had been waiting for was him. The chapel, the Vegas air was dry and electric, the neon lights casting a surreal glow over the city. Charlotte barely had time to take in her surroundings before Logan was leading her toward the small, absurdly tacky wedding chapel. She dug her heels into the pavement. "I am not getting married in a place with a drive-through option." Logan exhaled, half amused, half exasperated. "Would you prefer a courthouse? A yacht? Name it." She scowled. "You're acting like this is some kind of business negotiation." His gaze flickered with something unreadable. "Isn't it?" Charlotte's breath hitched. Because for a moment, just a moment, there was something in his voice. Something frustrated. Something that told her this was more than just a deal for him. She swallowed, her heart hammering. "Charlotte," he murmured, stepping closer. "We both know this isn't about the wedding itself. This is about you deciding if you're going to run for the rest of your life." Her throat tightened. She wasn't stupid. She knew that if she truly wanted to escape, Logan would let her go. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, he would. Because for all his ruthlessness, Logan Sinclair wasn't cruel. That was what scared her the most. Not the marriage. Not the contract. But the fact that the longer she was around him, the less she wanted to run. Her voice came out soft, hesitant. "Why are you doing this?" He exhaled, something flickering in his gaze. "Because I don't believe in unfinished business." Charlotte's pulse stuttered. She hated that his answer wasn't cold. Hated that some part of her wanted to trust him. She forced herself to look away. "Fine," she muttered. "Let's get this over with." The vows, the chapel was small and warm, the scent of roses and faint candle smoke lingering in the air. Charlotte stood beside Logan at the altar, her heart pounding. This was it. The officiant cleared his throat. "Do you, Logan Sinclair, take Charlotte Kensington to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Logan didn't hesitate. "I do." His voice was deep, firm, unshakable. Charlotte's stomach twisted. Then the officiant turned to her. "And do you, Charlotte Kensington, take Logan Sinclair to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Charlotte exhaled. Her entire life, she had been told what to do. What to wear. Who to be. But this? This was her choice. And as terrifying as it was, she didn't want to run anymore. "I do." The words came out soft, but certain. The officiant smiled. "You may now kiss the bride." Charlotte braced herself for something possessive. Something punishing. Instead, Logan's hand came up to her jaw, his thumb brushing against her cheek with devastating gentleness. Her breath hitched as he leaned in, his lips warm, slow, steady. It wasn't a victory. It was a promise. And for the first time, Charlotte wasn't sure if she had been forced into this marriage. Or if she had just willingly fallen into something far more dangerous. Charlotte had expected regret. She had expected to wake up in the cold grip of panic, suffocating under the weight of what she had just done. But when she opened her eyes in the dim glow of their Las Vegas hotel suite, she felt nothing. Not fear. Not anger. Just uncertainty. The marriage certificate sat on the bedside table, proof that she was no longer Charlotte Kensington, runaway heiress. She was Charlotte Sinclair. And that was terrifying. She sat up slowly, her silk robe slipping from her shoulders as she turned her gaze toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Vegas skyline twinkled beyond the glass, neon lights casting a faint glow across the plush hotel room. The space beside her in the bed was empty. Charlotte exhaled sharply. Of course he was already gone. Logan Sinclair wasn't the kind of man who lingered. The breakfast war Charlotte found him in the suite's dining area, sitting at the sleek marble table, sipping coffee like he hadn't just dragged her to a 24-hour wedding chapel last night. His sleeves were rolled up, the first few buttons of his shirt undone, revealing just enough skin to be infuriatingly distracting. Charlotte crossed her arms. "You didn't sleep." Logan didn't look up from his tablet. "Neither did you." Her jaw clenched. He wasn't wrong. She had spent the night thinking. Thinking about what this marriage meant. Thinking about how Logan Sinclair had gone from being a terrifying name on a contract to the only man who had ever truly made her feel something. She swallowed hard. She couldn't afford to feel anything. Not for him. Logan finally lifted his gaze, storm gray eyes locking onto hers. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Charlotte arched a brow. "You can't order me around just because we're married." His lips twitched. "Wouldn't dream of it." Liar. She reluctantly took a seat across from him, eyeing the spread of expensive breakfast options, fresh fruit, croissants, smoked salmon, eggs cooked to perfection. She reached for a slice of toast, only to have Logan push a cup of coffee toward her. Black. No sugar. No cream. Her exact preference. Charlotte froze. "How did you?" Logan sipped his own coffee, his expression unreadable. "You take it the same way you did as a kid." Her breath caught. She stared at him, heat rising to her cheeks. How did he remember that? She had spent a summer with him when they were children. She had been 8, he had been 12. A summer she had long since forgotten. But Logan hadn't. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She slowly picked up the cup, bringing it to her lips. The coffee was perfect. Damn him. Tension in the penthouse. The private jet touched down in New York later that evening. Charlotte had expected Logan to drop her off at her family's estate, shove the marriage certificate in her father's face, and leave. Instead, he took her to his penthouse. She stepped inside, taking in the modern space, black marble, sleek furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It was elegant. Cold. Like him. "This isn't my home," she said, her voice tight. Logan set down his bag and loosened his tie. "It is now." Charlotte spun to face him. "I am not moving in with you." Logan leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet amusement. "You'd rather go back to your father? The man who treated you like a bargaining chip?" She stiffened. He had a point. But that didn't mean she wanted to live here. With him. Logan sighed, rubbing his temple. "Charlotte, you're my wife now. Where else would you go?" She swallowed, suddenly feeling trapped. Not because of Logan. But because he wasn't wrong. She had spent her entire life running. And now, for the first time, she wasn't sure she had anywhere left to go. Her silence must have given her away, because Logan's gaze softened, just slightly. "I won't force you to stay," he said. Charlotte blinked. "What?" "I may have forced you into marriage," he admitted, "but I won't force you into this." Her chest tightened. She didn't understand him. He was supposed to be ruthless. He was supposed to be cold and possessive and cruel. But the man standing before her was none of those things. She hated how that made her feel. Charlotte exhaled sharply. "Fine. I'll stay. For now." Something flickered in his gaze, something she couldn't quite name. "Good," he murmured. He turned and walked toward his office, leaving Charlotte standing in the center of his penthouse, completely, utterly lost. A moment of vulnerability. Hours passed. Charlotte found herself in the penthouse's library, flipping through books she wasn't really reading. Then she heard it. The sound of ice clinking against glass. She turned and found Logan standing near the floor-to-ceiling window, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He looked different. The tension in his shoulders was gone. He wasn't the ruthless businessman everyone feared. He was just a man. And that realization was far more dangerous. Charlotte hesitated before stepping closer. Rough day? Logan glanced at her, smirking. Got married in a Vegas chapel. Dragged my wife across the country. All before noon. Charlotte snorted before she could stop herself. His smirk deepened. Didn't know you had a sense of humor. She rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched. For a moment, the tension between them shifted. Charlotte swallowed. Why did you really come after me, Logan? His smirk faded. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because, he said quietly, I never forgot that summer. Her heart stuttered. Charlotte sucked in a breath. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about Logan Sinclair all along. Charlotte hadn't stopped thinking about Logan's words all night. Because I never forgot that summer. She should have let it roll off her shoulders, dismissed it as nothing more than a passing comment. But it wasn't. Not with the way he had said it, softly, with something almost fragile in his voice. And that was the part that terrified her most. Logan Sinclair wasn't supposed to be fragile. He was supposed to be ruthless, untouchable. The kind of man who didn't care about the past. And yet, he had. Charlotte sat on the couch in Logan's penthouse, staring at the skyline as dawn painted the city in hues of pink and gold. She barely remembered that summer. It had been one of those blurred childhood memories, a warm haze of sunshine and laughter, of sneaking ice cream cones before dinner and chasing fireflies in the fading twilight. And now, the thought that Logan had been there, that he had held on to that memory for years. It made something in her chest tighten. She needed to know the truth. She found the photograph in Logan's study. It sat on the sleek, dark wood desk, unframed, tucked beneath a stack of reports. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The picture was old, slightly faded. A little girl with golden hair and a boy a few years older sat on the wooden dock of a lake, bare feet dangling over the edge. Her breath caught. That was her. She remembered this. The dock, the lake, the long summer afternoons spent chasing dragonflies and making up stories about magical kingdoms that lived beneath the water. And the boy beside her. Charlotte traced the image with her thumb, her pulse unsteady. Logan. It had been him all along. She heard movement behind her. Charlotte turned slowly, heart hammering as she met Logan's gaze. He was leaning against the doorway, sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. I thought you didn't remember, he murmured. She swallowed hard. I didn't. She looked back at the photograph, something soft and fragile stirring inside her. Not until now. A long silence stretched between them. Then Logan exhaled, stepping into the room. He took the picture from her hands, staring at it for a long moment before shaking his head. I hated that summer, he admitted. Charlotte blinked. What? His jaw clenched. It was the last good thing I had before everything fell apart. Charlotte's breath hitched. She knew Logan's parents had died in a highly publicized scandal years ago. His father had been embroiled in a corporate lawsuit, his mother caught in the crossfire of the press. It had been brutal, a feeding frenzy for the media. But she never knew Logan before all of that. Until now. She stared at him, really stared at him, and for the first time, she didn't see the billionaire with an ironclad reputation. She saw the boy in the photograph. The boy who had once sat beside her on a dock, listening to her ridiculous stories, laughing at things that no longer made him laugh. Charlotte's chest tightened. That summer, she whispered, did it really mean that much to you? Logan's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, in a voice so quiet she barely heard it, he said, it was the last time I was happy. Charlotte's heart broke. For the first time, she saw Logan Sinclair not as the man she had feared, but as the boy who had been left behind. The realization sent a sharp, aching pulse through her chest. She had spent so much time hating him, running from him, assuming he was nothing more than a cold, calculated businessman. But she had been wrong. painfully, devastatingly wrong. The dance, Charlotte wasn't sure why she did it. Maybe it was the way Logan's voice had cracked, just barely, when he said those words. Maybe it was the way he looked at the photograph like it was the only proof he had that something good had ever existed in his life. Or maybe she just didn't want him to feel alone. So she reached for his hand. Logan stiffened slightly, startled by the contact. But he didn't pull away. Charlotte laced her fingers through his, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry," she murmured. His throat bobbed, his gaze searching hers. "For what?" "For not remembering," she said softly. "For leaving." Logan exhaled, something flickering behind his storm-gray eyes. "I would have found you either way," he murmured. "You were never meant to be a ghost, Charlotte." A shiver ran down her spine. They stood there, in the dim glow of his study, hands entwined, the weight of their past pressing between them. Charlotte didn't pull away. And neither did Logan. Instead, he moved closer. Slowly, carefully, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch her. "Charlotte," he murmured. Her breath caught. And then, before she could second-guess herself, she rested her head against his chest. Logan stilled. For a moment, she thought he might step away, that the walls he had built over the years were too thick to let her in. But then, slowly, carefully, achingly gently, he wrapped his arms around her. Charlotte closed her eyes. The world outside the penthouse faded away. For the first time since she had met Logan Sinclair, she felt safe. And that was the craziest thing of all. Charlotte wasn't sure how long she stood there, wrapped in Logan's arms. She told herself it was just exhaustion. That after 6 months of running, of fighting, of trying to convince herself that this marriage was nothing but a mistake, she had finally reached her limit. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't exhaustion. This was comfort. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because comfort meant safety. It meant trust. And trust meant falling. Charlotte had never allowed herself to fall for anyone before. She had always held people at a distance, always kept walls between her and the world. Because if she didn't get close, she couldn't get hurt. But Logan Sinclair had never been content with distance. And she was beginning to realize, she didn't want it anymore either. The morning after Charlotte woke up feeling warm. Which was strange, because she always woke up cold. She shifted slightly, frowning at the heavy weight over her waist, the solid heat pressed against her back, her heart stopped. She was in bed with Logan. Not in the way the tabloids would assume. Not tangled together in a mess of passion and silk sheets. But close. Too close. Somehow, during the night, she had curled into him. Her head was resting against his chest, her legs tangled with his beneath the covers. One of his arms was wrapped around her waist, the other resting against the pillow, fingers brushing her bare shoulder. He was still asleep, his breathing slow and steady, his chest rising and falling beneath her cheek. Charlotte swallowed hard, her pulse thundering. She should move. She should slip out of bed before he woke up, before he realized she had let her guard down. But her body didn't want to. It was warm here. Safe. And for once, just for a moment, she wanted to pretend that was real. That this was something more than a forced marriage. That this was something she had chosen. Her fingers twitched against the fabric of his shirt. She couldn't want this. She couldn't want him. But then Logan shifted, his grip tightening slightly, a quiet sigh slipping past his lips, and that tiny, quiet sound broke her. Because it wasn't the sound of a ruthless billionaire. It wasn't the sound of a man who played power games, who controlled everything around him with an iron grip. It was the sound of someone letting go. And for the first time, Charlotte wondered if Logan Sinclair had ever had someone to hold on to at all. Her chest ached. Slowly, carefully, she pulled away, slipping out of bed without waking him. She needed space. She needed air. Because if she didn't get it now, she wasn't sure she'd survive whatever was happening between them. Avoidance and tension. Charlotte spent the next 2 days avoiding Logan. She kept herself busy, staying out of the penthouse as much as possible. She went for long walks, visited old friends, even called her father just to remind herself why she had run in the first place. But no matter what she did, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he had looked at her in his study, the way he had held her without expectation, the way she had felt at home in his arms. It was maddening. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. She wasn't supposed to want this marriage to be real. But then, on the 3rd night, Logan finally cornered her. She had just stepped into the penthouse, toeing off her heels when she felt his presence behind her. Charlotte froze. "Are you going to tell me what's wrong?" Logan murmured, "or are you just going to keep running?" Her breath hitched. Slowly, she turned. He was standing near the bar, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit like temptation incarnate. But his eyes weren't cold. They weren't guarded. They were searching. And that was worse. Because if he was searching, it meant he wanted answers. And Charlotte wasn't sure she had them. She swallowed hard, lifting her chin. "I'm not running." Logan arched a brow. "No?" He took a slow, deliberate step closer. "Then why won't you look at me?" Her hands fisted at her sides. Damn him. Damn the way he saw through her. Charlotte forced herself to meet his gaze. And that was a mistake. Because the moment she did, the tension between them snapped tight. His eyes darkened, his gaze flickering to her lips. Her breath caught. They were standing too close. Close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, crisp, dangerous. "Logan," she whispered. His jaw clenched. She could see it. The way he was holding himself back. She should step away. She should break the moment before it was too late. But she didn't. Instead, Logan reached for her. Slowly, carefully, as if he was giving her a chance to pull away. But Charlotte didn't. She couldn't. Because for the first time, she didn't want to. His fingers brushed her jaw, tilting her chin up. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. Her heart stuttered. She should. She should tell him to stop. But her body betrayed her. Instead of pulling away, she tilted her head up, her lips parting, her breath catching. And then, Logan kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was slow, deep, devastating. A kiss that burned. A kiss that ruined. And Charlotte knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. Because this wasn't just about attraction. This was something so much more. Something dangerous. Something real. And she had no idea how to stop it. Charlotte hadn't meant to let it happen. One moment, she had been standing in Logan's penthouse, her walls still half intact, her stubborn resolve still holding strong. And the next, she was crumbling. And Logan had been right there to catch her. His lips on hers were hot, demanding, careful, but devastatingly certain. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a claim. A silent battle neither of them wanted to win. She should have stopped him. She should have stepped back, reminded herself that this marriage wasn't real, that they had been enemies longer than they had been anything else. But the moment Logan's hands skimmed her waist, the moment his grip tightened just slightly, as if daring her to run, she shattered. Because she didn't want to run. Not tonight. Not when, for the first time in 6 months, she wasn't fighting. She was feeling. And God help her, but it felt good. The morning after Charlotte woke up, before the sun. The penthouse was still wrapped in darkness, the only sound the steady rhythm of Logan's breathing. She lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding too hard, too fast. She had done it. She had let herself fall. Her fingers curled into the sheets, remembering the way he had touched her, not just with passion, but with something deeper. Something dangerous. It hadn't been just physical. And that terrified her. Because she had always been good at keeping her emotions locked away, at pretending that she could walk away before anyone had the power to hurt her. But Logan Sinclair had cracked through her defenses with a single touch. And now? Now she wasn't sure she could put the walls back up. She turned her head, gaze settling on Logan's sleeping form. Even in sleep, he looked in control. His dark hair was tousled against the pillow, his jawline shadowed with morning stubble, his broad chest rising and falling with steady breaths. For the first time since meeting him, he looked peaceful. And that made something tighten in her chest. Because it meant that last night had meant something to him too. And she wasn't sure she was ready for that. Before she could second-guess herself, Charlotte slipped out of bed. Her breath hitched as she stood, her legs slightly unsteady. She reached for the silk robe draped over the chair, cinching it tightly around her waist, before padding out of the bedroom as quietly as possible. She needed space. She needed distance. Because if Logan woke up and looked at her like she was his, like last night had been more than just a temporary truce, she wouldn't survive it. Avoidance and a dangerous realization. Charlotte spent the morning alone. She sat in the penthouse's sunlit sitting area, nursing a cup of coffee she barely tasted, staring out at the skyline as if the city held the answers she couldn't find within herself. She had thought that sleeping with Logan would clear things up. That it would make this easier. But it had done the opposite. Because now, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he had touched her, like she was something precious, something worth holding on to. The way he had looked at her after, his fingers skimming her jaw, his lips brushing her forehead in a gesture so tender it had made her breath catch. That wasn't how enemies looked at each other. That wasn't how a contractual husband and wife were supposed to be. That was real. And Charlotte didn't know what to do with that. Because real meant vulnerability. Real meant getting hurt. And she had spent her whole life making sure that never happened. Logan finds her, the sound of footsteps made her tense. She knew it was Logan before she even turned around. His presence filled the space too easily, too completely. Running again? His voice was smooth, but there was something careful in his tone. As if he was waiting for her to bolt. Charlotte swallowed hard, fingers tightening around her mug. I just needed some air. Logan moved to the bar, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He didn't respond right away, didn't press her for answers. And somehow, that was worse. Because it meant he knew. Knew that she was avoiding him. Knew that last night had shaken her just as much as it had shaken him. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Then, finally, Logan set down his cup and turned to face her, arms crossed over his broad chest. What happened last night, it was a mistake. The words left her lips before she could stop them. Logan's expression didn't change. But his fingers curled slightly against his biceps, a flicker of tension in his jaw. Charlotte's stomach twisted. She had hurt him. She hadn't meant to. But she knew that if she let this become something more, if she let herself believe that Logan Sinclair could be anything other than temporary, she would never recover. Logan exhaled, his gaze searching hers. Was it? He murmured. Charlotte's breath hitched. Because suddenly, she wasn't so sure. The breaking point. Logan moved closer. Too close. Charlotte should have backed away. But she didn't. Because deep down, she didn't want to. Logan studied her for a long moment, his storm gray eyes intense, searching. Then, quietly, he said, "You're scared." Charlotte's pulse spiked. "I'm not, you are." His voice was calm, steady. Unshakable. "You're scared because this isn't just physical. Because it never was." Her heart stopped. Because he was right. This had never just been about attraction. This had always been something deeper. Something that had started years ago, on a sunlit dock, by a quiet lake. Something neither of them had ever forgotten. Charlotte's chest tightened. She couldn't do this. She couldn't fall. Because if she did, there would be no getting back up. I can't, she whispered, voice breaking. Logan's expression flickered, something in his eyes darkening. But he didn't stop her when she turned and walked away. Because for all his ruthlessness, Logan Sinclair had never forced her hand. And this time, it was her choice to run. Even if it was the wrong one. Charlotte had spent the last 24 hours pretending last night never happened. She kept her distance, retreating into her own mind, distracting herself with anything and everything that wasn't Logan. But the problem with running was that it didn't erase the truth. And the truth was, she had made a mistake. Not in sleeping with him, that had been inevitable. The way they had been circling each other, the tension crackling between them, the way he looked at her like she was his to protect, it had only been a matter of time. The mistake was pushing him away after. Because Logan hadn't just kissed her like a man fulfilling an obligation. He had kissed her like a man who had been waiting for her. And she had walked away. Again. The weight of it sat heavy in her chest as she stepped into a downtown coffee shop, trying to shake the tightness in her throat. She just needed air. Space. Clarity. But as soon as she ordered her coffee and turned from the counter, she felt it. A presence. Something dark. Unsettling. Then she heard the voice that made her blood turn to ice. Well. If it isn't the runaway bride. Her breath hitched. Her fingers curled into fists. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Daniel Carrington. Her ex-fiancé. The man she had been briefly engaged to before her father had sold her off to Logan instead. Daniel had been her father's first choice, charming, rich, a polished politician with a perfectly curated public image. But underneath? Daniel was vicious. Manipulative. Cruel. And Charlotte had learned the hard way that the only thing he had ever truly loved was control. Her throat tightened as she turned slowly, meeting his gaze. He hadn't changed. Still the same too-perfect smirk, the expensive suit tailored within an inch of its life. And still, the same soulless eyes. Charlotte forced herself to stay calm. Daniel. Her voice came out even. Stronger than she felt. Didn't realize you still kept tabs on me. His smirk widened. Oh, sweetheart. You know I never let go of things that belong to me. Charlotte's stomach churned. There it was. The reason she had left him. Daniel didn't want a wife. He wanted a possession. She exhaled slowly, willing her pulse to stay steady. I don't belong to anyone. Least of all you. He let out a slow, humorless chuckle, stepping closer. Too close. Charlotte forced herself not to flinch. Did Logan tell you that? Daniel murmured. You think he's different? That he isn't just another man using you for his own gain? She clenched her jaw. Because 6 months ago, she might have believed that. But now? Now, she knew better. Logan had never treated her like a pawn. He had never tried to own her. He had given her space. Choices. The one thing no man had ever given her before. And suddenly, standing in front of Daniel, she saw the difference. Felt the difference. And she hated that it had taken this moment to make her realize it. Daniel hummed, studying her like a predator with its prey. You really think Logan's going to keep you around? His voice was silky, sharp. Come on, Charlotte. I know you. I know what happens when you stop being useful. Her chest tightened. Because Daniel wasn't just talking about Logan. He was talking about her father. Her entire damn life. She had always been a bargaining chip. An asset to be traded. But Logan had never made her feel that way. Even when he had chased her down, forced her to marry him, it had never been about the deal. It had been about her. And that scared her more than anything. Because if Logan had never been the enemy, then that meant she had been running from the wrong person all along. Daniel reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Charlotte flinched. And before she could react, a strong, familiar hand wrapped around Daniel's wrist. The next second, Logan's voice was a low, lethal growl. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Charlotte's breath caught. She turned her head. Logan was standing beside her, close, solid, unshakable. And furious. His gray eyes were like a storm, dark, dangerous, controlled. Daniel smirked, yanking his wrist free. "Sinclair," he said smoothly. "Didn't think you'd be the possessive type." Logan's expression didn't change. But Charlotte felt the shift in the air. Tension thick and electric. "I'm not possessive," Logan said coldly. "I just don't like parasites." Charlotte barely bit back a sharp laugh. Daniel's smirk faded. For the first time, Charlotte saw it. The insecurity. The fear. Daniel thrived on control. On knowing he had power over people. But standing in front of Logan? Daniel was nothing. And he knew it. Logan's gaze stayed steady. "You're going to walk away now. And you're not going to come near my wife again." The word wife sent a shiver down Charlotte's spine. Because it wasn't just a title. It was a warning. Daniel let out a slow breath, plastering on a fake smile. Then, with a final glance at Charlotte, he muttered, "This isn't over." Then he walked away. Charlotte let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to Logan, her pulse still skipping. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. But when he looked at her, really looked at her, his expression softened. And suddenly, Charlotte realized she had been wrong about everything. Logan wasn't the enemy. He was the only one who had ever truly stood beside her. Her stomach tightened. Because for the first time, she wanted to stop running. For the first time, she wanted to stay. With him. And that terrified her more than anything. Charlotte sat in the back of Logan's car, her fingers pressed together as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Logan hadn't spoken since they left the cafe. Not a word. But she could feel his fury. It wasn't in the way he was glaring or gritting his teeth. Logan never lost control like that. It was in the way his hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, in the barely restrained tension coiled in his broad shoulders. She should say something. She should thank him. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't need you to save me." His grip on the wheel tightened. "I know," Logan said flatly. She swallowed. "Then why did you?" He let out a slow exhale, his jaw flexing as he changed lanes. "Because I don't like watching you fight battles you shouldn't have to fight alone." The words landed like a punch to the chest. Charlotte turned her gaze to the window, guilt creeping in. Because she had spent so much time pushing him away. Convincing herself that Logan Sinclair was the villain in her story. But he never was. Daniel was right about one thing, she always ran. And every single time, Logan was the one who found her. Maybe because he was the only one who ever cared enough to try. The thought shook her. The breaking point, the moment they stepped inside Logan's penthouse, she turned to him, heart pounding. "Logan, I don't want to talk about it," he said, shrugging off his jacket, his movements stiff. Her stomach twisted. Because she wasn't used to this. She was used to his control, his certainty, his calm authority. But this? This quiet frustration simmering beneath his skin? It wasn't anger. It was hurt. And it was because of her. Charlotte exhaled. "You're mad." "I'm tired." "Of what?" Logan turned to her, his storm gray eyes locking onto hers. "Of chasing you," he murmured. Her breath caught. The words hit deeper than they should have. Because this wasn't about Daniel. This wasn't about some forced marriage or business deal. This was about them. Logan had chased her across the country. He had given her choices when no one else had. He had stood beside her when she felt like she had no one. And yet, she had kept running. She wrapped her arms around herself, her chest tight. Logan, she whispered, I don't need an apology, Charlotte. His voice was low, steady. Final. She swallowed, throat dry. Logan wasn't asking for a confession. He wasn't begging for her to stay. He was giving her an out. And that was when she realized she didn't want it. She didn't want to run. She didn't want freedom if it meant losing him. Charlotte had spent her whole life believing love was just another kind of prison. But Logan Sinclair had never tried to trap her. He had been waiting for her to choose him. Her chest ached. And for the first time, she was ready to. The choice. Charlotte took a slow step forward. Then another. Until she was standing right in front of him, so close she could see the tension in his jaw. She reached for his hand. Laced her fingers through his. Logan stiffened. But he didn't pull away. Her throat was tight, words stuck somewhere between her heart and her mouth. I was wrong about you, she murmured. His gray eyes flickered. I know. Her stomach tightened. Of course he knew. Logan Sinclair was the smartest man she had ever met. He had known exactly what she had been running from. And still, he had been patient. Waiting. Her fingers tightened around his. I'm tired too, she admitted. Tired of running. Tired of pretending like this marriage isn't real when it is. Logan's breath hitched. For the first time, he looked uncertain. As if he couldn't quite believe her. Charlotte swallowed. I don't want to fight you anymore. Logan exhaled sharply. Then what do you want? Her pulse pounded. She had spent so long being afraid of that answer. But standing here, looking at him, she finally knew. You, she whispered. A muscle in Logan's jaw ticked. For a moment, she thought he might not believe her. That he might turn away. But then, his hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face up to his. Say it again, he murmured. Her heart stuttered. Charlotte's lips parted, her voice barely a breath. I want you, Logan. And that was all it took. Logan kissed her. Hard. Desperate. Certain. And this time, she didn't run. The real wedding, they didn't need another ceremony. Their marriage was already legal. But this time, it was a choice. Charlotte stood in the garden of Logan's estate, a small group of friends gathered, the New York skyline glittering in the distance. She had chosen a simple dress. No grand ballroom, no father dictating her every move. Just her and Logan. Logan stood at the altar, watching her with that unreadable intensity she had come to crave. As if she was the only thing that had ever mattered. And when she reached him, her hands trembled slightly. Not with fear. With certainty. Logan took her hands in his voice steady. This time, he murmured, just for her, are you going to run? Her chest tightened. No, she whispered, her fingers tightening around his. His lips curved. And when he kissed her, it wasn't just the start of a marriage. It was the start of forever. Epilogue, happily ever after. Months later, Charlotte sat in Logan's penthouse, a book balanced on her lap, the sounds of New York humming in the background. She heard footsteps, and a moment later, Logan's hand slid around her waist, his lips pressing to the side of her neck. Her pulse fluttered. Still. Even after all this time. She turned, tilting her head to look at him. You know, you never really won. Logan arched a brow. No? She smirked. You chased me across the country, forced me into marriage, and yet, I'm still here because I chose to be. His gray eyes darkened with something dangerous. Then he leaned in, murmuring against her lips, that's what makes it my greatest victory. Charlotte laughed, breathless. Because this wasn't a game. This was love. And for once, she wasn't afraid of it. The end.
Thank you so much for watching. All my stories are written by me, and I hope you enjoy them. I upload new videos daily, so I hope you'll hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'd also love to hear what you think about this story in the comments, and feel free to tell me what kinds of stories you'd like me to bring to the channel in the future.